Muslims and Jewish people for the longest time.
Well, you know, historians will argue anti-Semitism has been present throughout history, right?
Yes.
And it is hard for people to hear some of what you are saying and not react in that way, where they hear a characterization of criticism of the Israeli government or the Israeli military and see where you're separating from Jewish people. Right. A lot of people don't hear a difference.
Anti-Semitism is absolutely present, and it's been on the rise, it's been on the surge, and it is the worst kind of bigotry, it is pure hatred, and I always say that Muslims have to be at the forefront of fighting anti-Semitism, because Islamophobia is the other side of the same disease, and it's also on the rise. Judaism is a religion of peace, and the issue is when you try to conflate anti-Israeli policy with anti-Semitism, right? Anti-Semitism is when you persecute somebody or you discriminate against somebody based on their Jewish identity. Israel is a state. It has political policy, political parties. So you can criticize the state of Israel, but that's not necessarily anti-Semitism. So when people stand up and speak against the war in Gaza, when they're talking about speak against the collective punishment, when you deprive people of food as a weapon of war, when an entire population is displaced, when there's indiscriminate bombing, that is not anti-Semitism. That is speaking against Israeli policy. And I think it would be wrong to hold the Jewish community responsible for the actions of or the policies of Israel.
How are young people in Jordan thinking about this right now? I mean, what is the sentiment in terms of the American unconditional support for the government of Israel?
I have to say, in one word, there's outrage. You know, there is outrage because, you know, for most young people, even those who maybe were against American foreign policy or whatever, or disagreed with it, we always looked up to the US, you know, as a country of a democratic country with democratic values, with application of law, with freedom of speech, with, you know, human rights, etc. And as I said, you know, the young people are now feeling extremely disillusioned. How can this be happening while the US is allowing it to happen, while the rest of the world is allowing it to happen?
Well, the Director of National Intelligence in this country, Avril Haines, testified saying there will be a generational impact from the war in Gaza. And that was also a gesture to terror recruitment. How concerned are you that that is what may happen to some of these young people who you say are just inundated with images of what's happening?
It's not just the people who are on the extreme that are being enraged by this. It's people who are in the middle as well, people who are westernized, people who studied here, people who are suddenly just looking at the world and saying, you know, they're so disillusioned. They're saying, you know, clearly there are different standards, that humanitarian law is applied selectively and that our lives don't matter. And that it's okay for you know, almost 15,000 children to be killed, 19,000 to be orphaned. It's okay for you know, the infrastructure to be obliterated. It's okay to stop the delivery of aid and food to an entire population. That is collective punishment. It's a war crime, and it's happening. And so the young people are saying, you know, I guess the West doesn't like us. So in my opinion, this is probably one of the largest recruitment events that we've seen in recent history.
What you are describing is what Defense Secretary Austin warned Israel about, that you could have a tactical win and a strategic loss in the long term. That's what I hear you saying, that this will lead to more terror recruitment.
Absolutely. Is this war making Israel safer? Is it making our world safer? You know, I would argue, after 35,000 people dead, after the obliteration of the civilian infrastructure in Gaza, after the violations of so much, after the rhetoric that we're hearing, you know, from Israeli officials, calling Palestinians human animals, or saying, when the Prime Minister says that Palestinians are children of darkness, that they only understand the rules of the jungle, you know, when officials say we need to find a more effective way than death to inflict suffering on Palestinians. how is that making Israel safer? I mean, how? Peace is not about politics only, it's about people. Israelis are surprised when the word genocide is used because they cannot see Palestinians as anything but as a security threat, that they deserve what's happening to them. In a poll
They're
asking...
traumatized after October 7th.
Absolutely,
Many
traumatized.
Israelis.
I understand that. And I understand that because of my own background, that I would identify with the Palestinian side more. And because of that, I challenge myself every single day to put myself in the shoes of an Israeli mother who has a child that's been taken as hostage, or any young Israeli who has been taught and who's heard of the horrible persecution that the Jewish people have had to endure in Europe. And I try to empathize and see where they're coming from. And absolutely, we need the hostages to go home as soon as possible. And we need the war to end as soon as possible so that Palestinians can go back to their homes if they have homes left. So I understand that what happened in October 7th was traumatic and devastating for Israeli society. But the reaction to it has not helped the situation. You cannot just rely on this visceral reaction of retribution and revenge. Israel could have retaliated through surgical strikes against Hamas, but that's not what we're seeing today.